Welcome everybody to another Shelley 200 interview. The links to all the social media accounts where you can access all of our posts and further information about future events can be found in the description of this video. Today we have the pleasure of interviewing the accomplished actor Julian Sands. Mr. Sands has portrayed Shelley in the 1986 film Gothic, directed by Ken Russell. Amongst his extensive filmography is also A Room with a View, The Killing Fields, Warlock, and many other acclaimed films and series. He has been a longtime friend of the Keats-Shelley House in Rome, where he often does readings of the poet's works while putting the poems into context through stories and anecdotes. The limitations of lockdown did not stop Mr. Sands' dedication to this poet's memories. He has been an ambassador for the Keats-Shelley 200 and patron for the Shelley Memorial Project. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. We like to open our interviews by asking, when did you discover Shelley? What is your favorite poem and why?
Hello, Anna, and thank you for talking to me. I suppose I discovered Shelley at high school as part of the English curriculum. And the poems which I recall are Ozymandias, Skylark, and Ode to West Wind. And I wouldn't say either of those was my favorite poem today, but that's what I remember from the English O-level curriculum. I think my favorite poems, it shifts. Mont Blanc is very important to me because I'm a hobbyist mountain climber. I've spent a lot of time climbing in the Alps and all over the world, including Mont Blanc. And so there's something about his evocation of the power of the mountains and the absolute sort of statement of animism at its most forceful, which is always which always resonates for me. But, you know, the Mask of Anarchy was the favorite poem of both Gandhi and Karl Marx. So, of course, it is important to me. I think it wouldn't be if I were just to read one, it wouldn't be Mask of Anarchy. It's too emotive in some ways. It's too viscerally upsetting. So I'd go with Mont Blanc. Was there another element to that question? There was a third.
No, you did answer it. It was the why.
Okay, well, yes. So, but you know, if you ask me again next week or when we next meet, I might have a different answer.
Thank you.
That's a great answer. So we've heard that you're you've been an admirer of Shelley for a while. Our next question was just whether playing the poet inspired you to learn more about him, and what was the process of preparation for playing Shelley in Gothic? Well,
you know, Laura, when I said I was introduced to Shelley at school as part of the O-level curriculum, in truth, I was probably more responsive to contemporary poets in our studies. Ted Hughes, for instance, comes to mind. Hawk Roosting, I remember using as an audition piece when I auditioned for drama school. The way I was taught Shelley, and I'm afraid this may apply to many people, was that he and Keats, to a lesser extent Byron, but were sort of middle distance, wafting figures who, with windblown hair, they weren't properly presented to us. And it wasn't until Ken Russell, then maybe 10 years after O-levels, asked me to play Shelley in his film Gothic, that I did start to look again and started to understand something of the maturity he had as a young person, and the power, the physicality, the sexuality, the political and philosophical vigor, those things all resonated for me in my reading around him for Ken Russell's film. And my principal source at that time was Richard Holmes' book, Shelley, The Pursuit. And I remember having lunch with Richard Holmes. Simon Callow was a friend of Richard's, being a very literary fellow. And I knew him from Room with a View. I actually knew him from years before, when I was just working as an assistant at the Half Moon Theatre, and I was the costume assistant. And so I was Simon's dresser in a play called The Machine Wreckers. But that's, but Ken, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with his body of work, but he was very much about images and style and set pieces, more perhaps than he was about the interior character and emotions of Shelley. I think in the film Gothic, the wonderful Natasha Richardson was probably the most emotional performance as Mary Shelley. She was just such an extraordinary actress. She embodied something which perhaps Gabriel, Tim Spall, and they played Byron and Polidori respectively, didn't achieve. What we achieved, I think, was a sort of crazy, manic, passionate, driven dance of death. And once we started filming, it was quite a short shoot. You know, we were working all day at sort of full tilt. There wasn't a lot of time for repose and reflection and deeper discovery of Shelley's being. Once I still have my copy of Richard Holmes' The Pursuit, which I was reading at the time we made the film. I also borrowed a couple of Richard's books, which for various reasons I wasn't able to return because I was always traveling, but some 30 years later, I did return them. It's always important to return books when you can.
Better late than never.
Yes.
So the next question is still a bit related to, well, very related to the experience of portraying Shelley. If there was a particular moment or experience that really stands out to you or that had a big impact on you?
Well, there were two moments. One was when Ken wanted this image of Shelley on the rooftop, sort of trying, you know, invoking lightning to strike him. It was all wrapped up in the Prometheus ideas of Shelley. And of course, at school, you know, he'd been such a sort of always blowing things up and creating experiments, galvanizing and trying to reanimate. I mean, it's something of a proto-Frankenstein figure. And Ken said, yeah, this was before health and safety came into force. And it wanted me to climb up this slippery rooftop, which was being hosed down with water pipes to get the effect of rain and wind. And I was naked. If any of you have seen the film, you will have observed. And it was also very late at night. But something about the liberation of being naked in the wind, in the rain, on a rooftop, beckoning to the heavens to sort of open up and absorb was an extraordinary release of connection with Shelley, with the elements, and with his sort of shining comet-like life. That was a moment in the film I felt very closely connected to his essence. Another and very different was when we did this sort of the image. It was part of a tableau of Mary Shelley's dreams of Shelley drowning, where he sort of just drifts by under the water, which we shot in Lake Windermere. It was all shot in the Lake District, a little bit outside London, some interiors. That was, it was just so sad. It was so sort of, I was in my mid-20s when we filmed it. He was 29 when he drowned, and something about just the sadness of his early death connected in a way which was just very, very emotionally complex for me. And then on the side of the lake, as the sun went down, we had this pyre where they'd taken a cast of my face and created this image of me, of Shelley, on this funeral pyre. And although I was not in the scene, I was there watching, and it was very strange to see this image of oneself, this three-dimensional image of oneself on the funeral pyre. So those two are moments in the making of the film which I recall as being emotive and important.
It must have been incredibly powerful. Our next question, well, it's about your support of the Keats-Shelley House. You've been supporting and reading there for a significant time now. How did you first become involved, and what does it mean to you to honour Shelley's memory as you do?
Well, I became involved with the Keats-Shelley as a student in the 70s drama school. I'd gone in pursuit of romantic Italy, and by myself on, I don't know if they still have them, they were called Interrail cards, which, were sort of 20 quid and you could travel anywhere in a 2-month period. And I was in Rome and certainly went to the Keats-Shelley House and also to the non-Catholic cemetery. And I still have photographs. I wish I'd dug one out. I could hold it out to the screen of me at Shelley's grave at that time. And certainly when I became more involved with the house recently, I looked in the visitors book to see if I'd signed. Maybe I might have sneaked in, I might not have signed the book, but I didn't find my name. But I became involved with them more recently because I'd been touring a theatre piece based on the life and work of Harold Pinter, in which I used a lot of, his non-dramatic writing, his letters, diaries, prose, interviews, and other people's commentaries who'd worked with him. And it was something John Malkovich and I put together. John directed, I performed it, we took it to the Edinburgh Festival, really as a tribute to Harold, not long after he died. But we played it in New York for a long run, we toured it all over the world. And somewhere along the way, Duncan Wu, who is a professor of English at Georgetown University, had seen it, and he was editing at that time a new anthology to be published by Keats-Shelley House in Rome. And they got in touch with me and asked me if I'd write a preface for the book, which I was very flattered to be asked. And I said I would, but I needed just a little time to re-immerse myself in Shelley's and Keats' work. And that's really, as an adult, rediscovering the full range of the pantheon of their poetry was astonishing. And I said, and I wrote the preface, which still is in print in this book. And I said, but look, I'd love to come to Rome and maybe do a reading at the house. It was sort of my idea. And we arranged that. And I think I was also doing the Pinter show there. But I went a couple of days early so I could just be in the house and approach people as they came in, tourists, and say, I introduced myself, I'm Julian Sands, I'm the designated reader for today. Is there a poem you'd like to hear? And the intimacy of, you know, just standing as close as we are, seemingly, and reading people's favorite poems or sections of them was a fantastic way for me to get ideas about how I would edit and elide and choose a selection for me to read. It was a wonderful learning experience for me, but, you know, like doing street theatre in the house. And then I put together a program, a shuffle, and presented this, what I call Keats-Shelley Ghosts and Lovers as a tag, which is me reading the poems or extracts from poems which I feel complement each other as a reading and give a full and rich account of the body of work of both poets. And sometimes I introduce a little bit of Byron. That was, it was so enjoyed and appreciated by people that we just kept adding shows. And then I was doing a film in Rome a few months later. So I was there for about 2 months, and every weekend they'd announce I was doing a reading, and there aren't many seats there. It has to be said, they're only allowed to have what can be fitted into the library room. So these seats always filled up, and thus it continues. And I always try different poems and different orders and I have a sort of settled playlist, but that can vary depending on if people make special requests or if there's a time limit. And as a theatre piece, I presented it all in America at universities and theatres. And every time I learn more about the work, about how I can best present the work, how to fulfill the ideas and words, and about them as young men. So it's a journey which continues to thrill me. And in fact, I just yesterday, Giuseppe Albano, whom I'm sure you know, is they're doing their own Shelley 200 sort of short film, which I did some recordings for, which it's amazing with an iPhone. I could do the specific recordings and send them to him. And so it goes on, it's an ongoing relationship, and I'm quite sure I will be presenting there again, I think later in May. We have an idea to do 3 shows, and people come from all over Europe. I don't know, who are tapped into that circuit. It's very intimate, but it's also epic because their work is. And the setting, powerful setting of the Keats-Shelley House is so pregnant with Keats's presence, but knowing too that Shelley lived for a brief period at the top of the Spanish Steps on the Via Sistina, and knowing how he is evoked and represented in the house too. So that was a longer answer than I intended to give, but I hope I addressed your questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And hopefully we'll be able to see your performance in London sometime soon.
Yeah, oddly enough, I have performed it in England, but not in London, and always available for private performances too. I have been friends here in Los Angeles who have wanted to give a dinner to sort of literary-minded people. You know, it's just sort of the after-dinner entertainment. But I would love to, and indeed, we're talking about doing a presentation for the Shelley Memorial in Horsham. I have to say to both of you, Laura and Anna, that I'm not an academic. My knowledge, my working knowledge of Shelley, Keats, and the poems are, it's fairly limited. For instance, you referred to Calvin earlier, Laura. When I hear him talk about meter and rhyming schemes and rhythms and the particular anecdotes and timings of his life, and I mean, I know a little in compare, but I'm sort of I'm not presenting myself as an academic when I tell what I know, and I'm always learning more and correcting myself too. If either of you ever attend one of these readings, I shall be referring to you for corroboration and correction.
That's very kind, thank you. And the next question kind of incorporates the others as well as the last one, which is comparing your experience portraying Shelley and your experience developing your readings and learning more about Shelley. And again, as you mentioned, revisiting Shelley at a different point of your life. Which one do you think gave you a clear image of his character?
I think undoubtedly the latter reintroduction. When I played him for Ken Russell, it was like it was a bit superficial. It was like playing a rock star, and we were all for that weekend supposed to be opiated out of our minds, and so it's engaging and fun, and not without depth and poignance, but it's by compare to my adult consideration of him and his work, it was a bit superficial. So and the just considering his work over now a number of years since this book was first sent to me in a draft form, they call it Essential Poems, their anthology. Yeah, it's because also when I was in my 20s, the very idea of stillness, breathing, slow time, the most essential elements that both Shelley and Keats preach, I didn't have any comprehension of, because everything was at 100 miles an hour, and that was then.
That's a great answer.
I'm sorry, was there a second? There was a second part to that question, or did we?
No, I think it's just the way that Laura and I separated each of our questions, but that will be Laura's.
Yeah, so just the final question was, what is the most remarkable experience you've had from your involvement with the Keats-Shelley House?
Well, it's the. You've been in the Keats-Shelley House. It's the visceral presence of Keats, particularly. Knowing, he died just a few meters from where I'm reading, I feel his presence dramatically whenever I I go in there and begin a reading. I do a sort of puja to both Keats and Shelley for their blessings. But I'm not talking in a necessarily supernatural way, but I just feel him deeply around. Shelley too, but there is something about the point of death being so physically near, that proximity gives some sort of metaphysical element to the soirees there. So that, and just the continuing exploration and celebration of their work. And it's, you know, sometimes different poems just go on fire. They become so powerful. And that's not something I pre-plan. It just sort of happens in the words. You know, Shelley's great ode on the death of John Keats, which I usually finish the evening with and make it clear to everybody, it's not just an elegy for Keats, it's an elegy for himself too. You know, sometimes it's quiet and considered, and sometimes it just explodes. And similarly with other work too. So it's that continuing experience of them and their work and the house, and my own understanding, and what I continue to discover in more recent biographies, and by talking to people like you, Laura and Anna. I mean, one is a student, as Shelley was.
Sounds really moving. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. No, thank you so much for answering all of our questions and giving such a wonderful insight to your relationship with Shelley. And we'd also like to thank everybody watching this video, and just please make sure to check our previous interviews and the links down below and in our website.
Thank you very much, Julian.
Thank you both. Thank you. And if any of your viewers have specific questions for me about anything, but you know, about Shelley or Gothic or whatever, they can email them to Anna, and Anna can forward them happily. And I hope to see you all at a show sometime.
Great idea. And on that note, yep, thank you very much. That brings the interview to a close.